Moving on, Kev, always good to pick your brain on one or two things. We'll start with the heavyweight division, a division that you're very well versed on. Saw some pictures of yourself with the big man himself, Tyson Fury, always in the news, always got something to say, always got something going on. Of course, his bout with Deontay Wilder had to be postponed. We are now going to see that on October the 9th. Hopefully, I'll be able to get to Vegas, but anyway.
Hopefully, you will be here, mate.
Hopefully so. How's he looking, the big man?
Well, what I've seen, I think he looks great. In fact, I think this is the fittest I've ever seen him. You know, his whole demeanor, I believe, has changed. He has sort of reinvented himself, you know, from his comeback about 3 years ago, where he was taking weight off and working through some issues at the time. He's now very jovial. He's very healthy. His skin is glowing. He looks good in sparring. I know there has been a number of rumors out there in the media, and those particular rumors, I haven't seen them. You know, we've had Tyson trained for the last 2 weeks of his most recent training camp at our gym where he was sparring, and everything that I saw, he looked fantastic. You know, one thing that really sort of baffles me about Tyson Fury is how a guy so big can be so hard to hit. You have such good head movement, have such good perception of distance. And we saw all that in the last fight against Wilder. You know, he controlled the distance perfectly. His reflexes are second to none in the heavyweight division. In fact, you know, there'd be a lot of people, I believe, who actually would think that, you know, someone like Tyson should be in the pound for pound list because he does things that other heavyweight fighters just can't do.
We mentioned Deontay Wilder, somebody that you know very, very well. Malik Scott is now his head trainer. I know Malik has been part of several camps all over the world with various different champions in his time. You know him very well. What do you make of that addition, and what do you think he'll bring to Deontay Wilder?
Look, I love Malik, and I was so happy for him. You know, when he was brought on board as the main coach. Malik's a guy who's got a very good boxing brain. He understands the game. And I believe in the future he's going to become a very, very good coach, and this is a great start for him. Can he completely reinvent Deontay Wilder? I don't believe so, but one thing he will do is he will bring a lot of enthusiasm into that camp. He'll bring a lot of passion into that camp, and that I believe will be the biggest change in Deontay Wilder's training camp.
With that being said, you know where this is going. Can you see any different outcome in the trilogy bout on October the 9th?
Well, I tell you what, you look at, everyone talks about Deontay's power, and we know how powerful he is. He's, you know, the biggest punching heavyweight of all time, if you look at his record. But let's remember, he had that power in fight 1, and he had that power again in fight 2. And in both those fights, he couldn't get the job done. I'm looking at Tyson at the moment, and the movement, the training, the reflexes, the confidence, it has grown and developed so much in the last 2 or 3 years. And it would be very, very hard to see we know Deontay's got power. And anyone with power can knock anyone out, especially in the heavyweight division. But he couldn't do it in the first 2 fights. So, you know, you'd have to be a brave man to think he could do it in the 3rd fight.
The 18 months that's elapsed since the second bout, I mean, it'll be longer than that, I think. I think it'll be about 20 months by the time they eventually get in the ring on October the 9th, all being well, and there's no COVID, and there's no this, that, and the other that affects that. Hopefully not. How much do you think the layoff will affect both Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder? Do you think it's more damaging for one or the other, or is it both the same? They've both been out of the ring for the same amount of time.
Look, I tell you what, like, Tyson's 32 years old, and he's had a lot less fights than Deontay. Deontay's 35. And, you know, Deontay has had to wait a long time to try and to try and reverse the embarrassment of the second fight. And, you know, I look at his body language, and I look at the things he says and the things that he does, and I look at the fact that, you know, he didn't want to, at the press conferences, he wore headphones, he didn't want to listen to what Tyson had to say. Well, you know, those sort of things, and he had Malik doing all the talking for him. Those sort of things are not the actions of a confident man. And also, when you start blaming everybody around you, you know, like I would think that the right thing to do is to take ownership of your mistakes and try and correct them, rather than blaming everyone else for your loss. And I'm talking about the previous fight. So there are those sort of things I struggle with. As far as the time, you know, it allows both guys to change their preparation, to spend a little bit more time making sure that this fight's going to be a great fight, and that both guys perform to their best on the day. You know, they've shared the ring now for 19 rounds. They know each other's style a lot. I actually think that it's probably a good thing for Wilder that he is looking to change things up. I've watched some of the footage of the work that he's doing with Malik. As I mentioned before, you know, Malik's a guy that understands boxing very well. But I look at Wilder, and I look at Tyson Fury, and as far as boxing IQ goes, I don't think there is any comparison. I think Tyson's boxing IQ is far superior, and that to me is the difference.
If I had to push you for a prediction on October the 9th, how do you think the fight would go?
You know, it's a bit early to be making a prediction. You know, obviously you can tell by my tone that, you know, I like Tyson Fury again. I really do. I think that what he did in the second fight was unbelievable. And at the age of 32, I think he'll only grow in confidence. And there's no reason why he wouldn't be able to do that again.
And moving on in the heavyweight division, one of your ex-opponents, or one of the opponents that you've trained a fighter against, Anthony Joshua, faces Joshua-Usyk September the 25th in the UK, packed out stadium, which is great. You were spoilt to box with Joseph Parker against Junior Farr in front of a full crowd. We're going to get our turn over here in September, which is great.
Tremendous.
But a very tricky fight, a lot of people think, myself included. Anthony Joshua defends against mandatory challenger, former cruiserweight, undisputed kingpin, Joshua-Usyk. What do you make of that one, Kev?
Look, I think it is too. I think it's a style that doesn't flatter Joshua. I know there's a lot of people saying, like, a good big man will always beat a good little man. But I tell you what, that little man has, we talked about, you know, boxing IQ, and when I was talking about Fury before, God, Joshua-Usyk is a very clever fighter, a fighter who's very good at setting traps, a fighter who's very good in his offense and his defense. You know, I think it's a style that is a difficult style for Anthony Joshua, and he will need to use all his superior size and strength and power if he is to get the job done on that fight. But I don't see it being an easy fight for him.
Now, there seems to be this perception that Anthony Joshua struggles against shorter fighters. We saw it with Andy Ruiz. Joseph Parker's not too dissimilar dimension-wise to Joshua-Usyk. They went the distance for the first time in Anthony Joshua's career. We've seen him stopped in the amateurs by a shorter fighter. As I mentioned, you trained Joseph Parker against Anthony Joshua. Just how difficult is it to close that distance when you're the naturally shorter fighter? Obviously, you had a certain referee, a certain Italian referee, who wasn't really too keen on anybody closing the distance in that fight. But from a preparation point of view, as a trainer, what sort of things do you think Joshua-Usyk will be looking to do? What things worked for Joe? What things didn't work for Joe?
Well, I think the movement of Usyk, the angles that Usyk fights off, are totally different from Joseph Parker. That's why I think this is a more difficult, a more awkward style for Joshua. Usyk is very good at on his feet. He's very good at changing angles. He's very good of putting himself in a position to make you miss and to counter. And I see that as being something that will work for him against Anthony Joshua. I even go back to the Povetkin fight that Anthony Joshua had, and Povetkin, at the end of his career, slowing down with foot and hand speed, was able to hit Joshua early in those first couple of rounds. Because of that, I see Usyk having a very good opportunity to make this an extremely difficult fight for Joshua.
And conversely, what does Anthony Joshua need to do in that fight? A lot of people say that he needs to go out there, not try and box with Usyk, go and try and stamp his authority on the fight as the bigger, stronger, naturally bigger, stronger man. Is that how you see it?
Well, I tell you what he doesn't want to be doing. He doesn't want to be waiting. He needs to use that superior height and strength and reach and let his hands go. He needs to try and overpower and knock Usyk out, go right through him early in the fight. I don't think it's the sort of fight, if he was to use the similar tactics that he did in the Andy Ruiz rematch, he could be very easily outboxed by Usyk. So I think it's a fight that, he needs to show who is the big dog.